Welcome to this Phi Beta Mu Legacy Project interview. It is my pleasure to introduce to you today my longtime friend and member of the Phi Beta Mu Hall of Fame, Garry Taylor. Garry, welcome.
Thanks. Good to be here. I'm honored.
So, gosh, I can't even imagine how many years in music it has been for you. Take us back to the very beginning. How'd you get your start in music?
Well, my greatest early musical influence was my dad. There was always music in the house. He was a country and western guitar player and singer. Before I was born, he played in a country and western band, and he kept that up, even though he wasn't in a band while I was around. He kept playing it. He'd play and sing regularly at home, and I got a big dose of that at a young age. He was also the choir director at our church, and every Sunday morning, my siblings and there's seven of us in all. My
Big
siblings and I
family.
would, yeah, big family. We'd gather around the piano and sing the hymns that were planned for the service. One of my sisters would play the piano, and we'd all gather around and sing all the different parts. And then in those days, churches would host singing schools. They used
Right,
the
yeah.
notes, just kind of old time. Uh, we were Baptist, sang a lot of hymns, and Dad would carry me to those singing schools. By the time I was in the fifth grade and ready to begin band, I pretty much already knew how to read music and could get my way around the notation pretty well. And so in the fifth grade, we started band in the fifth grade at Hansville. I went to Hansville all the way through first through 12th. And I wanted to play trumpet because I was a fan of Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass.
Mm.
I'm not sure it was the music or maybe that album cover of the Whipped Cream album that was so memorable. But I wanted to play trumpet, so my mom took me to the beginner meeting and went in with trumpet on my mind, but I came out with a trombone. And I never regret that decision at all. I enjoy playing the trombone and I've played it ever since. So the years I was at Hansville, from the fifth grade to the 12th grade, we had seven different band directors. And,
Wow.
I look back on that and I think, well, how could we even have any kind of a band program with that many band directors changing out pretty much every year? But when I do look back on it, I remember, having a really good time in band and thinking that even as early as ninth or 10th grade that I might want to be a band director.
Really? Mm-hmm.
And so then my senior year, as usual, we got another band director, a new band director. He was fresh out of Troy, and he was young. He was energetic, enthusiastic. He drove a Corvette, and his name was Robert Bean, and he just got us all
Yeah.
fired up about band. And so that's when I was pretty much convinced that that's what I wanted to do. And
Wow.
also during my senior year of high school, I had a couple more musical experiences that had a pretty good effect on me. One was I joined the choir, and I was invited to be a part of the FFA quartet, even though I was not in FFA. I did join it later just to make things legit, but we got together and the choir director played piano for us, and we ended up winning the county, district, and ultimately the state FFA quartet championship down in Montgomery. So
Wow.
yeah, I was pretty proud of that. Even though I don't consider myself a very good singer, but I was singing bass in the quartet, and I could read the music. I got the notes right. The voice wasn't that great, but it was a good experience. I was also invited to play trombone in a rock band. We call ourselves the Iron Creed, and we played sock hops and dances around the area. And that was a lot of fun playing Chicago and that kind of stuff. But then
Wow.
it was time to go to college. So that put an end to all that. And
Yeah. And
I
and
have,
and yeah, and what a great background you had. I mean, just coming up. So instrumental, vocal. I mean, you kind of had it all the way around. And knew you wanted to be a band director in high school.
right.
And so
I
on
wanted,
to Troy.
oh, no,
Yeah.
no,
No.
on to Auburn. But
Auburn. Okay.
yeah, my older brother and older sister both went to Auburn, graduated from Auburn, and we were an Auburn family. The whole family were huge Auburn fans, and I've always been a huge Auburn football fan. And so I really didn't give much thought to going anywhere else. And so
Mm.
I went to Auburn and never regretted that either. Uh, I loved Auburn. I got there and involved in the marching band, going to all the SEC games, all Baton Rouge and Knoxville and Gainesville and all over, and just had a great time. That first fall was terrific. I do have one. It was kind of a traumatic memory at the time. My roommate was Woody Leonard, who was also a trombone player. He's from Georgia. He was from Valdosta, Georgia. Went through Frank Butenschon's band. Good, really good musician, great trombone player. And I was fortunate to kind of get hooked up with him early, and because I learned a lot from him. But we one morning we were going to meet the bus at 4 a.m. to go to Mississippi to play Mississippi State. The game was in Jackson. I know Mississippi State's in Starkville, but for some reason we played the game in Jackson. And so Woody and I somehow got mixed up, and our alarm clock didn't go off and we missed the bus. And Dr. Walls, we call him Doc, was the band director. And Dr. Walls ran the band with an iron hand. He was very tough. And he would talk with his teeth together, and I was scared to death. I was so I knew he was just going to kill us. He was our college career was over in my mind. But Woody was very level-headed. And he said, let's put on our band uniforms, go out to the interstate, and hitchhike to
Oh my
Jackson.
goodness.
I said, Woody, that's a great idea. So we got a ride out to the interstate, and we were out there in our band uniforms, holding our trombone cases with our thumbs up. And just in a few minutes, a car came by. It was a couple Auburn students, probably seniors. They were older, and they were headed to the game, and they delivered us there. And so we were standing in the parking lot when the buses pulled up. They had stopped to eat or something, so we got there before they did. And I remember just standing there. I'm sure I was at attention, waiting to get killed by Dr. Walls. And so, sure enough, he comes off the bus. He doesn't even look at us. He walks right in front of us, and through gritted teeth says, "Glad you could make it." That was the end of it. But I thought our career was over at that point, but it turned out that it wasn't, that everything turned out okay. But anyway, that's just one story about my marching band experience. But Dr. Walls was a mentor to me. I ended up really thinking a lot of him, and in fact, at his funeral just a few years ago, some of us got together. He was a trombone player. In fact, he taught applied trombone to the music education students. So I got to see him a lot, and some of us got together and played at his funeral, just the trombones, and that was pretty meaningful to me to be able to do that. Another mentor I had at Auburn was Bodie Hinton. Dr. Hinton was
Wow.
the head of the music department, and he was he was just completely different from Dr. Walls. He was kind, he was gentle most of the time. He was very intelligent. He was very wise, and he was the kind of person. He was, almost grandfatherly, and you just knew that he cared so much for the students there.
Yeah.
And I've never been a great conversationalist, but with Dr. Hinton, we call him Chief. Chief he'd come up to you in the hallway or out on the sidewalk or whatever, and just it was so easy to carry on a conversation with him because he was genuinely concerned about us all, and it was so I had those two completely different
Mhm.
mentor experiences at Auburn. But
A lot of
I was
ways to be a band director, aren't there?
that well,
They were both,
yes.
yeah.
Uh, I feel fortunate that I had both of those
Oh, absolutely.
outlooks.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
And
anyway,
yeah. Bodie Hint was my mother's band director, by the way, at
is that
Tuscaloosa
right?
High School. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So,
Wow.
so many common threads that run amongst us.
Exactly. And there are a lot of common threads. But anyway, in addition to the marching band, of course, I played in the concert band and brass ensemble, jazz ensemble, the orchestra, pep band, and something that was also very important to me was I played in the Auburn Knights Orchestra, which is a professional dance band, and it was run by students. There was no faculty involved in it. It was kind of outside the school, although we practiced on the campus, but it was not really officially associated with the school. And it's still going on. It started back in I think the first year was 1929. That band's been
Wow.
around a
Yeah.
long time, and it's still
Yeah.
going strong. In fact, I still go to some of the reunions every summer. There's an Auburn Nights reunion in
Mhm. Yeah.
Opelika.
Yeah. I was just thinking, I see on Facebook all the time announcements about the reunions and
Yeah,
lots of familiar faces
yeah, right,
that are
right.
named there coming back.
Another name I'll drop. And in fact, my senior year, I had two roommates, Woody and Rusty Logan, who many people watching this video will probably know. Of course, Rusty is now the executive director of AMEA, taught at Auburn High School for a long time, and just a great guy, another great trombone player. So when I got to Auburn, I mean, he had Truman Welch as a band director in high school in Elmore County. Woody had Frank Budenshine at Valdosta, and I went through 7 different band directors in 7 years. So, you know, our backgrounds were a little different. So I learned a lot from those guys, and I had to, and I just tried to keep up. I just tried to keep up with them. I didn't want to be left behind by those two that raised the bar so much for me. So I really appreciate having that experience too. Anyway, I got I graduated from Auburn, and my first job was at Brooks High School in Killen.
Hmm.
Back in the month of June of 1976, I graduated from Auburn. I got married, and I got my first teaching job. So that was a pretty exciting month for me.
Full summer. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So I got to Brooks, and honestly, I felt pretty clueless about being a band director. I felt like I really wasn't prepared, and it was just me. It was from beginners to throughout. I was it. I was the
Yeah.
band guy, and that's the way it is with most schools that size.
Yeah. Small schools. You're it. You're
Yeah,
Mr. Music. Yeah.
and you don't. There's no help, and you don't. You know, it's really uh, a tough job, but I will say that I learned more those 7 years. In fact, I probably learned more the first year I was at Brooks than I did 4 years at Auburn as far as how to be a band director. It was just one thing after another. Either I would screw up so bad that I learned from that, or hey, that worked. Sometimes it did, and sometimes it didn't. But it was a great place to start out. The students were fantastic. The parents were fantastic. The administration, John McCabe was the principal, and he kind of took me under his wing. And because we moved to Florence, we had no money. We just took off up there. Our both our families were here in Coleman, and so we were up there. Didn't know anybody, and so it was nice having that Mr. McCabe to kind of help. We had bought a mobile home, and he drove me around to different places, that we might could put it and helped out a lot. He helped. We didn't have any money. The first, as you know, the first paycheck a teacher gets is not till the end of September or 1st of October. So he vouched for me at the bank to get a loan to get us through that
Oh gosh,
first few
yeah.
months. And so Brooks it turned out to be a really good experience for me in several ways. But one, it was close to Florence,
Mhm.
close to UNA. So during that time, I got my master's degree, I got my AA certificate, and I met a lot of really great people, some that turned out to be mentors, like
Mhm.
Dr. Jimmy Simpson.
Oh,
Uh,
absolutely, yes.
yeah,
Mhm.
he was fantastic to us. He actually hired Jan, my wife, to work in the office there in the music department at UNA, and that was very helpful to us, of course. And she got to know a lot of the music people, the students and faculty over there, even before I did. But having her over there made it easier for me to get to know them too. And so, yeah, Jimmy Simpson, I would call him one of my, along with Bodie Hinton and Bill Walls and Glenn Spiller. I think
Yeah,
Jimmy
there's
Simpson,
another icon. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, Jimmy Simpson is definitely right up there toward the top of the list.
Yeah.
Um,
And I hear this a lot with people like you who are icons in the field. You have done so much, and they start to talk about those early days, and there are those few names that keep coming up over and over that they had mentors that you're not having to start at square one and just reinvent the wheel, that you had people around you to help develop you, so that when you do get out on your own and it's how do I do this, uh, that there are people to fall back on, and people that I guess your education just really began when you became a band director.
That's exactly right in my case, because when I was in school at Auburn, I wish I could go back and do that again and take it a little more serious. I mean, I had a great time, and I was in everything I could do as far as the music I did, but I I didn't really approach it like, hey, I'm going to be doing this one day. I'm going to be a band director one day. I better get this. That's not the
Mhm.
way I approached it. I approached, I was just having a good time playing my instrument, going to SEC football games.
Yeah.
So, if you can go back and do it again, if there's any advice for young folks, take it seriously. I would definitely do that. But anyway, at
Yeah.
Brooks, I remember going in at the beginning, and Mr. McCabe asked me if I'd ever driven a school bus.
Oh my.
I said, well, no. He said, well, you're going to need to take a school bus 2 miles down the road to the elementary school and pick up the beginners every day, and bring them back up, and then take them back when you're through. And so, it was a little different back then. Today, you almost have to, you have to have a lot of training and licenses to drive a school bus. But
Oh yeah, the CDL, and
right,
oh
right.
yeah, yeah.
And I did that later, but back then I don't guess you had to do that, because he just took me out in the parking lot, and we had about a 30-minute session on how to drive a school bus. And then for that first year, I drove the school bus every day back and forth to get those beginners.
Wow.
And then after that, they came up with a room underneath the lunchroom down there. They the other end of that area is where they stored the lawnmowers and things. But we had a beginner band room
Beginner
on the
band room where the
yeah,
lawnmowers had been.
right, yeah. And it worked out. I liked it better than driving a school bus, but it worked out fine.
Yeah,
Anyway,
yeah,
uh,
that's great.
I felt like those Brooks years were great and taught me a lot. And having UNA close by was great because uh, several reasons. Like I said, I got my master's and my AA, but I was also able to get to know and take advantage of having some really sharp students, college students nearby that could come in and help my band, and some of those have become great friends, lifelong
Mhm.
friends. Like Becky Rogers, for instance, who's now
Oh
Becky Rogers,
gosh, yeah.
Kathy Miner,
Mm.
Randall Wallace, Rick Whitmire, Rusty Parker. Uh, these are people that Lloyd Jones, and he's another one I
Yeah.
think the world of. I played in Lloyd's first Shoals big band and learned a lot about jazz. I mean, I'd already had a pretty good background in jazz, but Lloyd Jones, not Lloyd, Ed Jones, such a great jazzer. Lloyd is too, but this was Ed Jones
Right. Yeah.
band, and just his rehearsal technique, just being in a rehearsal that he was running, really gave me a new appreciation for
Oh
the
yeah. Yeah.
jazz music.
And of course, Ed Jones had worked with Truman Welch down
Yeah,
at Elmore County. So again,
there's another
you
connection,
know,
right?
there's some names that just keep coming up over and over, no matter who you talk to who's been ultra successful, that these are people who are part of their background. It's,
That's right. So, and those great, who knew at that time? I would, they would recommend somebody, and I'd get them out there, and they'd work a sectional, or they'd uh, teach a lesson, or listen to pass offs. We were big on the pass offs at Brooks.
it works.
It does work, and I mean, I remember we took it very seriously, and the kids really bought into it. But anyway, it takes a lot of time, so it was good having these students. And if you told me then that these same college students coming over would end up to be some of the greatest friends I have in the world, it's just amazing how that works out. But anyway, after 7 years, um, my alma mater came open, and I decided to go to Hansville and go back to Hansville as the band director. And I did, and I enjoyed it. But the next year, I got the opportunity to come to Coleman, and Coleman had, I grew up in Hansville, which is next door to Coleman. And so I'd always been aware of the Coleman band program. Bonnie James was
Bonnie
like,
James, that's another, yeah, another good
yeah,
name.
he was a legend, and everybody knew who he was. And uh, and coming, Hansville and Coleman used to play football all the time. It was a big rivalry. Uh, Not so much anymore because of the different classifications and everything, but then the Coleman band would be so impressive. And so, and then when I went to Brooks, uh, Coleman was in the same district, and they would go to district at UNA usually, and the Coleman band would come up there, and it's so impressive, And so when that came open, I didn't know that, I could even have a shot at it, but somehow Bonnie James actually came into the band room at Hansville one afternoon and said that, and he was good friends with the superintendent, but they were also looking for a principal. So the superintendent was going to do the hiring, not the principal. And Bonnie asked me if I'd be interested in the Coleman job. And I said, well, I think I would. And so he said that the superintendent, Ed Allen, had asked him to just go out and find a band director. I don't want to, I think the year before they'd gone through interviews and took a lot of time and effort, and that guy lasted 1 year and left. And so they didn't want to do that again. So he just asked if I wanted it, and I did, and I got it. So all of a sudden I was the band director at Coleman, and that turned out to be a nice experience for me for 21 years.
21 years, yeah. Long run.
Yeah, the thing about it, and I I hated to leave Hansville. Those are great kids. I had some super kids there, and I wasn't planning on leaving, and but I couldn't pass it up. A well-established band program with more resources, a better salary,
Mhm.
a director at the middle school. It was just so many things about it that, I knew I wanted ultimately. I didn't know if I was ready for it, but it was kind of thrust upon me, and I jumped at it, and it turned out pretty good. Although the first year or two, there were some ups and downs, but it turned out to be, and I guess there are everywhere. I think most people, when they first get to a new place, there's some growing pains, but, and I had
Absolutely,
some,
yeah.
definitely, but
And-
it turned out to be great. And
Yeah, and after a year or two, it's your program,
yeah,
The other kids have left, and what had been, oh, well, the new band director and his new ways after a couple of years, it's like, well, that's the way we've always done it. That's the only thing that they've ever known is your
right,
way. Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah.
But I think one of the special things about the area, and this, it's not that this is the only place this happens, but the camaraderie between the directors in the Coleman County area at that time was just, it was really special, I think. And some of those same names I mentioned to you, those students at UNA that came over and helped me at Brooks, Becky Rogers, Kathy Miner, Rick Whitmire, Rusty Park, they all ended up teaching in Coleman County, along with another great friend, Steve McClendon, was at Fairview.
Yeah.
Vanessa
Another Hall
Watts,
of Fame member right
yep,
there.
Vanessa Watts at Good Hope, uh, Wes Maddox and Louette Benefield over at Holly Pond. But we just got along so well. We got together socially. We wanted to do things for each other, and build up the area bands. And so it was a fun time for us. And I see that some in other places too. And I think it's so great that happens, because like I was talking about earlier about you being the only one there, you're alone in that situation. Most of those the county school, all of those other county schools, the director was the one person, for the whole, isolated, like I was at Brooks. So you need that. You need each other. You need that camaraderie. I had that at Brooks with other band directors up there. Larry Ricketts, a great friend up there, was at Rutgers High School just up the road, and others. I kind of hate to mention names because I know I leave out people, but there were. I think you cannot just stay alone and try to do it yourself. You need that. If it's only a phone call or just a word or two, you need some encouragement and reinforcement every once in a while from those that do what you do. But we got together, those of us in that area. We formed, I think it may be the first county marching band jamboree in the state. If it's not the first, it's one of the first. And we didn't plan on that. We planned on, since we had bands of schools of different sizes, we didn't see each other's band usually. So we wanted to take an opportunity and just come. We had this big parade in Coleman that all the bands participated in, the fair parade. So we decided that one Saturday night after the fair parade, we were just going to come over to Coleman Stadium and perform for each other. That's basically all we had planned, to perform for each other. And we showed up, and the stands were full of people. It was incredible. It was just a packed house. And so we thought, well, hey, let's charge next year. let's make some money off it. We started doing it, and it continues to this day to be a huge event in Coleman. Every year after the fair parade, the bands come around. But that started, I think it was either 84 or 85 we started doing that. And then we started hosting a pre-district because the other bands in the area didn't have a stage. So it was a good way for them to get used to playing on stage and get some comments too about their preparation for district and state. And then through the next few years at Coleman, we hosted all-state tryouts, solo and ensemble, all-county honor band, district festival, the district honor band, and then for a while we hosted a jazz festival too, which was one of the few in the area. So we got our a good taste of having groups come around and folks come to the school.
Absolutely. Pretty active parent group, because it sounds like you had a lot of things going on. So how did
Oh
you
yeah,
organize,
well we
the
did have,
logistics of all
we
of
had
that?
great parents that enjoyed doing those kinds of things. Some of them, I remember they would do, they would come to me and they said, "Don't you think we ought to provide food for this, or don't you think we ought to set up this area or hospitality area or whatever?" And they had so many great ideas, and I just kind of let them do that,
Hmm.
it usually turned out pretty good. So I was proud of what we could do there.
Yeah.
And I was always fortunate to work with people smarter than me, like my colleagues at the middle school. Lavelle Thrasher was there for a while.
I
Lavelle,
remember Lavelle. Yeah.
Lavelle's he's still a great friend. I conduct the Coleman Community Band. I've been doing that for the last 12 or 13 years. And Lavelle's actually the chairman of the board of the community band, plays tuba in the group. He's just
Wow. Mhm.
a wonderful friend, and I would call him a mentor because he's I go for him. I go to him for advice pretty regularly. He's a smart guy, and
He is. I remember him from his days at Decatur Band Instrument Company.
yeah, he was there for a
Uh,
while. He was at Coleman Middle School before I came,
yeah.
and then he
Mhm.
went to work in Decatur for Shoko and the band instrument company.
Yes.
Then he came back to Coleman Middle School, and
Yeah,
then
I did not know that.
yep,
Okay. I
yep,
did not know he came back.
yeah, he came back while I was at Coleman, and just for a little while. Then he got into
Yeah.
administration and went down to Wallace State and got pretty high up in administration. In fact, he
Mhm.
was they asked him to be the interim uh, president of Sneed State for a couple of years. So he got pretty high up in the administration world and junior colleges. But anyway, Linda Bean is still at the middle. She's been there a long time. She's doing a great job. Randall Key was an associate director with me for 10 years. And he's just a lot of, he's a lot of fun for one thing. He's also has a lot of information, and I learned a lot from him. And then my last year, Christopher Smith, who is a former student, came in and took Randall's place and continued on as the director of bands after I left. He's still there, doing a great job. So it's good seeing your former students do well is always good. And I've got several out there that I'm very proud of.
Yeah. I mean, some amazing names that you are mentioning during this interview. So 21 years at Coleman, and Brooks was what, 7? So, and of course then Hansel. So that's bringing you up to being able to retire
You're exactly right. I retired for the first time in
for the first time.
2005. And that same year, Becky Rogers, another that name again, she was president of AMEA, and she contacted me about applying for the open executive director position. And so after a little thought, I decided that I would, and so I got that. And
Yeah.
they also needed an editor for Alabrev at the same time. So I thought, well, I can use a computer, and if there's something I don't know how to do, maybe I can learn how to do it. So I decided to do that too, and I've been doing that ever since. And so then again, a year later, I got a call from the headmaster, Dr. Roberts at Lee Scott Academy in Auburn, and asking if I'd come and be the band director there. And after a year out of teaching, I was starting to get the itch again, actually. And both my daughters were in school at Auburn University. So I thought, well, that might work out. So I went down and checked it out and did it. I did it for 2 years, and it was another great experience. A very small program. I had
Right.
to.
But always good quality.
I'll tell you what, those kids work hard. We got
Mhm.
ones at state both years I was there, and I think they've been getting ones every year since then. It's really a good program down there, and it, it was so small. I had to do a lot of rewriting just to get all the parts heard in the concert band. Uh, and that was kind of a new experience for me, but it was one I kind of enjoyed because I'd always been pretty good at. I always enjoyed doing the notation program, arranging and stuff. And so I had an opportunity. There was a need for it there, and so I was.
Abs- yeah.
It was a good. That was another good experience for me. But things got. My mother-in-law got sick up here, and so we were actually. Dan was going to come down with me, and we were going to do that for at least 4 years till I got both daughters out of school. But my mother-in-law got sick up here, so she moved in with us, and it was kind of tough on my wife. So I gave that up after 2 years. But I enjoyed doing it and remember it fondly.
That's great. Yeah. And when it comes to rewriting parts, I know sometimes people think, oh, that's cheating. But as I talk to really top people, it's no, the composer doesn't know your band. You need to make that piece sound good. And if you need to do some rewriting, you do the rewriting so that it fits your band and it fits the piece and that the piece sounds better.
Exactly. It's necessary sometimes. If you've got, for instance, if you've got two French horn parts and only one French horn player, and no other instrument in the band has that part, then you need to do something to make that part happen. And that's just one example of 1,000 different examples
Oh,
that you could have.
absolutely.
But anyway,
Absolutely.
that was something that came out of that experience that just out of necessity. Um, it, it ended up being an enjoyable thing to me.
Yeah.
But uh, so after that, my career pretty much consisted uh, of AMEA, the Alabama. Actually, I've been pretty involved with ABA before. In fact, I think I may hold a record for the number of years serving on either an ABA or AMEA board because starting in I guess it was in the early 90s, I was chairman of District 3 twice. I served as
Mhm.
the jazz chair for ABA. Back then, we call it the president of IAJE, the International Association of Jazz Educators. I was recording secretary of ABA, then president-elect, president, and immediate past president. So I served 14 years on the ABA board. And then immediately following that, I got on the MEA board as executive director and editor for another 17 as executive director and another one for assistant executive last year. And then this year, it's just the editor. So before this interview, I got my calculator out, and I think that's 34 years and still counting. So if anybody's
Wow.
been on the board longer than 34 years, let me know because I think I have the record.
I think that's going to be the record, Gary. I can't imagine anybody having done it.
And I know it
Having done.
sounds crazy. People, they say, well, why would he do that? But I'll tell you, as I look back on those years, I, I feel truly blessed to have had the opportunity to get to know some amazing people. I worked closely with all those AMEA presidents, the ABA and other division presidents, the division officers, district chairs, all state clinicians, music educators from all over the state and the country, really. And so to me, it's been worth it. And in fact, when I first started volunteering and getting involved, I was worried that taking time away from my band program, would hurt my band program. But actually, the benefits in my mind far outweigh those concerns. The networking, when just talking to smart people, you're going to learn. You're going to out in after hours at AMEA or at Allstate or at all the clinics you go to. It's just so much information that you can learn from and benefit from. And so the way I look at it, I've had great opportunities to enrich my band program through the years. Not, I'm not taking anything away from it. I'm enriching it. That's just the way I look at it.
That's amazing. Long way from driving the bus to pick up the elementary kids.
Yeah, yeah.
But I guess you do what you need to do at each step of the way. You do the best you can with what you got, and then you have better.
Yeah. I would like to add before I finish, I mentioned Glenn Spiller a while ago. He has been a great mentor. And I saw a meme on Facebook the other day. It said, my teacher thought I was smarter than I was, so I was. And so I think with Glenn, early on, Glenn thought I was a better band director than I was, so I tried to be. And so I, I, I I'm honored that Glenn kind of took me under his wing early. I learned so much from him, and
Oh yeah.
I talked to him just the other day. He gives me advice. Well, I ask for it, but he gives
Yep.
me advice on what music to play. He always did.
He
I,
was he has always been super at that. You know,
yes,
that's
and he's
another one of
always
those,
right.
you know, oh, your band always sounds good. Well, you pick music that fits the band so that the band sounds good. Yeah, that's just another one of those things. Yeah, I remember Glenn when I was in junior high school in Northport, Alabama, and he was at Livingston University at the time. And he would come over and listen to rehearsals and things, and was so supportive of me. Going into high school. I mean, our relationship goes back that far, and yeah, definitely one of the giants in our field, and one of those names that just keeps coming up, no matter who you talk to. Glenn Spiller's going to be in there somehow. Yeah. Well, Garry, anything else? Any other words of wisdom for the young folks coming along who, uh, want to have the kind of career that you and these other members of the Phi Beta Mu Hall of Fame, the kinds of careers that you've had?
Well, I think, and I kind of mentioned this a while ago, but reach out to folks that can help you. Don't ever think that. And I know I used to be this way because I felt kind of shy about asking somebody older and wiser. I thought I might be bothering them or troubling them, but they will be more than willing to help with advice. Come by your band room, whatever. I know. I mean, that's pretty much the mantra of Phi Beta Mu is to promote bands. And anybody in that organization, I know, if you contacted them, they would be more than happy to help you. But not just, and probably more importantly, those folks around you that are doing exactly what you're doing, they're probably having exactly the same problems you're having. And when you put two minds together, you're more likely to come up with a solution, and it's going to be more enjoyable. So get together with your colleagues and buddies across town or across the county, and have a good time and hang in there. That's all. I mean, I know if I could go back, people ask if you could go back, would you do the same thing? And I definitely would do the same thing, but I would try to do it better. I guess is the right way to put it. I would hope I could do it better. And so just reach out to others and enjoy what you're doing.
Fantastic. Gary, thanks so much for taking this time to sit down with me today. So for those listening, we hope you have enjoyed this interview in the Phi Beta Mu Legacy Project, this interview with Gary Taylor. Again, Gary, thank you so much.
Thank you for